This is your 2 News Oklahoma Fantasy Football Forecast.
And we are here on the 2 News Oklahoma Fantasy Football Forecast. I'm here with Mike Collier, Caden McFarland.
Hey, buddy.
And so what we are going to do is talk a little bit about this podcast plan. We're starting this podcast about fantasy football. Mike Collier.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen.
What are we expecting?
What are you doing here?
Yeah, wait, wrong door. I thought this was the Beyond the Forecast podcast. Oops, I've landed here.
Can you imagine if I was part of that?
You know what? You should be a guest. You should be. Okay,
It
let's
wouldn't
not
go as well as you might think, my friend.
we can't go too far off the beaten path because I think we all promised ourselves that we would stay tight and compact
Did
with
we?
this. Yeah, well, I
Okay.
guess. But yeah, we're going to talk fantasy football. I'm a huge fantasy football fan. I listen to like 3 podcasts per day.
Yep.
Does that
is
make me an expert?
weird behavior.
And I stayed at a Holiday Inn last night too. So.
Yeah, look, you're the weather guy. I'm the sports guy. And interestingly enough, you know way more than I do when it comes to fantasy foot. Like college football dominates my weekend. I got to save some time for my kids. So I come to you with questions all the time. My fantasy team's performance greatly enhanced last season by your knowledge, and you are, even though you're a weather guy, and I don't find you to be like a huge sports fan into every single thing, but when it comes to fantasy football, you are not messing around.
That is the highest compliment I've ever received in my life. Honestly, Ryan, I mean, what a way to start this podcast. No, I mean, look, I tend to hyper focus on some things in life, I'll admit.
Okay.
And fantasy sport or fantasy football in particular is one of them. But you're
Mike's
right.
lost 3 marriages because of fantasy football.
Yes.
People don't know. Little known fact.
All to the name of Aaron, but no. Anyway, but no, I love fantasy football, but I don't follow like college sports. I don't follow baseball. All that other stuff bores me. But fantasy football, I find very intriguing.
All right.
So here we are.
Yeah.
So I'm the sports guy.
Yeah.
Probably playing the role of like the average fan, Joe Schmo, who would like to do a little bit better in his fantasy football league. And I think it'll be fun for me to ask some. I know the NFL and I know sports in general, but I don't dive into the extent that maybe he does. I'm looking for some tips quickly. I think we can provide some of that, and then maybe also be interesting.
But
maybe.
I always
We'll see.
because I don't know, since I don't follow college as well, I like hearing more of their backstory of these players.
We can do some of that, yeah.
You know, so I think that's very critical when you go into the season, what their pedigree is and what their potential is from that. So, Ryan, what role are you playing here?
Well, I'm going to kind of try to steer the ship a little bit. And, I really like fantasy football. And, not to brag, I won 2 leagues.
Oh,
is that right?
That's 2 leagues, I know.
Is that 2 more than Mike won
2
last
more
year?
than me, yeah.
There you go.
Well, I have a trade problem. I'm an addict to trade, so I tend to
Feels
And that's what I had to
right.
cut back on last year, is because I spent all year, or my previous 2 seasons, I just kept pumping out trades. Like, who can I get to bite on something?
Exactly, yeah.
But now I've calmed it down.
Patience,
Just let guys do their thing. And then you lose, but you make the playoffs at like 7-7, and you're fine.
And I'm that guy who gets to the end of week 5, and there were 333 trade offers that I haven't even clicked on the email and opened it yet.
Oh, I do not like people like
have
you.
the time. No, I know. Trust me, I know. So we've kind of got the whole spectrum covered here. I think it's going to be fun.
And I figured with you being here too, I feel like you could give us a good idea of, like he was saying, sort of the backstories and some insight on some of the local guys. Oklahoma offers a lot to the NFL as far as players not only from the state but who go to the schools here.
No doubt. And as we record this tonight, the Hall of Fame game is going to be played, and our guy Dylan Stoner is not going to be involved. I guess there's been an injury there in training camp.
What's weird? I watched Dylan when he was in
Isn't that weird?
Mini,
right?
The little elementary. And he was good then.
My neighbor, he comes and visits my neighbor. Dylan is as good a person as there is.
Sure.
So I've met him, going back to when he was in high school, obviously, and then through college at OSU, where he was just a class act the entire time. And man, sure hope that guy sticks around the NFL.
Josh
for
Jacobs,
a long time.
Local guy.
Yeah.
But then you can even go and you've seen Kyler in person. I mean, Baker.
I've got thoughts on, and not all of them are great. Like I'm not as high on Kyler. Now, when it comes to fantasy, you got to kind of separate those two things, right? Is Kyler going to lead the Arizona Cardinals to a Super Bowl? Is Kyler the guy you should take as soon as you possibly can in a fantasy draft? Those answers may not be the same.
A very interesting stat I saw yesterday, and I was just kind of mind blown about this. Whenever Call of Duty was doing 2 XP bonuses, like their weekends, that you could get your guns, even better. His completion percentage went down.
Stop it. Who went and figured that out?
Well, they took his gamer tag, looked at all the statistics, and compared it to the weekends that he was playing.
That is beautiful.
And so I think now there's a little more credence to the stipulation in his contract.
That has now been taken out because he handled that pretty well. And the Arizona Cardinals, we used to be I grew up in New Mexico, and we were for 3 years season ticket holders for the Arizona Cardinals.
Wow,
they are a joke of a franchise, and they are in the process of jacking up Kyler Murray at quarterback as well. So, I mean, that's par for the course for them, fellas.
But I loved when he came out to talk. He even had a little pun on himself. Like
he's got a pretty good
he
sense
said
of
I'm a little
humor.
short. And I was like, he was kidding on himself.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that about him. We all need a little more humility in life. But what we're gonna do, as I said, I listen to 1 billion podcasts per day. They tend to go on, and a lot of people just want the information. So I'm hoping that our goal here is to give the info out and keep it at that. So let's start with Ryan. I'm just going to throw a curveball to you.
Sure.
You're the host, and I'm asking a question already. Who are your top 3 players that you are targeting this season?
It's tough because running backs are so hit or miss. Like a lot of people are like, "Oh, Christian McCaffrey, you got to take him number one if you have the chance." But he's been getting hurt every year, so it's one of those things where it's like, "Well, do you take him? Do you not take him?" I mean, if I were given like a top pick, I'd probably lean more in the direction of a Derrick Henry, even though he got beat up toward the end of last year. But he's just so consistent, and a big back like that. I mean, it's he's going to succeed no matter what in that offense.
And he's been fantastic. I mean, you could say he's getting older, but every year, other than the injury, obviously, every year he's just the top 5 running back. Yeah. So, I mean, it's almost like a given.
I'm curious to see how well Tyreek Hill does in Miami.
Sure.
Because
can Tua throw the long ball?
That's gonna be the
I saw evidence this week.
Yeah,
right,
he did. So
right,
see,
looked pretty good.
At first the Dolphins were sending out tweets of like, "Oh, look at this ball," and it's like this fluttering heart, coming down, and then
they were just getting warmed up.
Right.
That's
but the
all.
last couple weeks, I have seen some good stuff.
Look, dumb guy question here. You mentioned both McCaffrey and Henry, and we get that running backs don't last forever.
Sure.
But you want, if you can, in fantasy, to take the guys that you expect to have a monster year who are in their prime. When you mention McCaffrey and Henry, are you just a complete idiot if you ever take a receiver at number 1? And I'm not necessarily. I'm saying this is not necessarily for this year, but just generally speaking, when I think about McCaffrey and Henry and the fact that running backs get hurt as much as they do, I know that you absolutely need elite running back play on your fantasy team.
Sure.
But does anybody take receiver number 1?
Absolutely. There's the 0 RB theory that you take Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, you get loaded up with receivers, and then
roll the dice.
Well, yeah, because you've got running backs potentially out there that nobody really wants to pick in the first 4 or 5 rounds, or if you're in an auction league, wants to spend a lot of money on, like Miles Sanders, that could potentially be good enough to. I mean, if you got the top receivers that could just float you on by. James Robinson coming back from the Achilles, he looks. I saw him running the sidelines. I was like, dang, he might be ready to go. Maybe not the first game, maybe the second game, and he's not going to go in the top rounds. So you've got an elite, or I would say maybe not elite, but a good solid running back that you can pick these players. And then when you got the top receivers, especially in a PPR league, I mean, that's definitely a route you could take, and people have seen success in that. Not me in particular. I'm in what we're doing this year, and we're all going to be in it together, is a Dynasty Superflex League. It is 12 teams, so that does make you're really going to have to pick wisely. It's auction, so it can get a little crazy, especially with 12 teams. But our goal, this year is to have fun, and we're going to be able to talk about this on the podcast. And then in my other league with Superflex, I'm heavy on. I've got Justin Jefferson, DK Metcalf, Stephon Diggs on my team already, and so my running backs are a little sketchy, sketchy. So I've got to figure that out myself.
All right, yeah. Team McFarland has just signed up as of 4 minutes ago.
Well, my phone just about time.
It gives you notifications when I sign up for the league.
I'm the league manager, man.
I was concerned about the litany of questions the ESPN fantasy app was throwing my way in terms of what it wanted access to in my life. They want it all.
Just a social security number. You can
that's right,
and I'll take care of that.
That's right.
So who would we heard Derrick Henry, Tyreek Hill. So there's two. What about your two?
Well, look, I'm intrigued. I'm assuming that Baker Mayfield will beat out Sam Darnold.
Okay.
And I'm intrigued by McCaffrey and Mayfield together. It feels like he could be a pretty good little check down Charlie quarterback.
And that's where your knowledge comes in handy, because I would say, well, what? I mean, we saw and not too much of that in Cleveland, but he had pretty much. Well, I guess he had Kareem Hunt to check down too. What about in college? Was he checking down a lot?
No, it was different. I mean, there was certainly some throwing to the running backs, but they pretty much did as they pleased. With that offense, Lincoln Riley, the players they had in the Big 12. But Baker, he muscles up and he can throw a decent deep ball. But to me, he's going to make his living in this league going forward, making all the right decisions and getting the ball out of his hand, like a Tom Brady does. I think if he's got McCaffrey in his backfield, and Chubb obviously was great, and Hunt too. I mean,
sure.
For whatever reason, and I think part of it is the dysfunction in the Cleveland Browns organization. That never did coalesce in the way it should have. Part of it probably was Baker's injuries last year. I think he was star-crossed and snake-bitten a little bit. In a parallel universe, that thing goes much, much differently.
Yeah.
But I think, obviously, he's going to want to utilize, and he's going to be smart enough to utilize McCaffrey, I think, in a really good way. I think that could be – now, does that mean I want him at the very top of the draft?
Baker is a sleeper then.
I think – well, look – there are a lot of quarterbacks I think are going to put up better numbers. No doubt in my mind. Carolina's got several holes.
But is
as a backup quarterback or something.
Yeah,
yeah, exactly. I think he'll be the starter, and I think there will be a redemption story there. Just knowing what I know about him, and the way he's always bounced back from adversity in his career. He doesn't seem like a guy who's just going to fade away. Like we've seen, there are guys who get chewed up and spit out in this league at that position. I think he's too tough for that.
I laugh because there is a OU homer in this. There's two of them in this league, okay, and that's a good thing. I don't look. I
fade
I
appreciate
that,
use that knowledge.
I appreciate the passion for OU and OSU. I think that's phenomenal. I think that's great because look at me. I'm a fantasy homer over here. So, but I know two in particular that will probably be really jockeying to get Baker from him. So we can't wait to see that out. Yeah, just so you know. I mean, Baker might go. We only have $200. He might go 150. The way you all are so passionate about. Anyway, so those are two. I find that very intriguing. I would say my two is going to be Justin Jefferson.
Yeah.
I mean, he's 20. He just turned 23. One of the top receivers in the league for his rookie and sophomore year. He's got the same quarterback. He's got a more, I would say, pass-happy coach this year. Mm-hmm. I mean, sky's the limit. He might be the Cooper Kupp of last year. So that's just my 2 cents to that. Also, I would say as far as a running back is concerned, you really can't look. A lot of people are down on Najee. I mean, they are just down, and I don't get it because that's who they're going to have to rely on. And I think Najee is going to be a tremendous running back. So those are would be my top 2 picks this year. Now, Ryan, I was really shocked that you didn't throw a Detroit Lion in there and there was a running back. I mean, DeAndre is set to potentially be the top man this year.
Deandre Swift is really good, and he's still young. It feels like he's been. I mean, to people who follow the Lions, it feels like he's been in the league forever already.
Sure, right.
And it's only been 2-3 years.
Yeah, he's only 24 or something like that. Yeah.
But and he's really good, and Goff, who can't throw down the field all that often,
ever.
will be handing it off. But the Lions really figured out their offense toward the end of last year, where they weren't a good team.
Yeah, right.
But they sort of started to figure it out. Goff started to get a little more comfortable in that offense. I think bringing all that back, plus DeAndre Swift being healthy, because he's always kind of week to week. He's one of those kind of guys, so it's a little nervy to take him.
Right.
Like if you were going to take like a first round running back,
right.
It's a little scary because it's like, well, am I going to have to find a replacement for him week after week after week? But since Calvin Johnson, I have not wanted to take a Lion in the first 3 rounds.
and Calvin, I mean, he was inducted to the Hall of Fame last year. What an incredible career. Jameson comes in this year, and he was probably going to start on the PUP list. And, when they draft him, there was hope that he would start week 1. But it looks like it's going to be probably 6 games in before they see him. But, why rush him? They've got plenty of years ahead of him. But he might be, he's not going to be Megatron, I don't think. But, he might be the new wide receiver 1 coming down the pipe.
If he comes back healthy and can do the things that he was doing at Alabama, he will be the most effective receiver they've had since Calvin Johnson.
Of course, you have Amon St. Brown. I guess we're going to hit the Lions real quick. Amon St. Brown, who did actually really good, and I've been trying to trade for him in my league because I see a high potential there of, at least in PPR leagues, to be a consistent player, kind of like a Deontay Johnson, where you can always count on him. And I don't think he got injured at all last year, so the injury risk seems pretty low.
And like with that turnaround toward the last maybe 6 games or so that they had last year, it was all him. Like it was Goff knowing how to, like, figuring out how to use him in the offense, and he was electric.
Right, and especially he doesn't have to go more than 5 yards.
Right, yeah. It helps when you have these little guys who you can just dump it off to.
I was stunned that they just kept Goff. That was mind blowing to me. Yeah. But let's go down to the Dallas Cowboys because we got a lot of folks around here, and we've got Tolbert. Where did he go to? See, this is where did he go to college?
I don't even know.
Their new receiver. Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to throw that on you.
I know where CeeDee Lamb went to.
Yeah, you're right. Exactly. I am off the Zeke bandwagon. I think he is old and done and out. Tony Pollard is the guy, but Jerry's out there saying, "Oh, Zeke's our man." Well, yeah, he's paying him $1 trillion. Right. He's going to say that, but the reality is
so you haven't gleaned anything from like Cowboys preseason clips or camp clips that make you think Zeke is in a little bit better, shape. And
the beat writers tend to know the real fact, and they're all on Tony Pollard. Yeah.
Makes sense to me.
I mean, Zeke, when's the last good year Zeke had? I mean, it wasn't last year, it wasn't the year before, so that was...
What is his rookie year?
Sorry. At that position, man, they get chewed up and spit out pretty quickly.
So what are our thoughts on Dak? I mean, he started off pretty good, had that incredible year. He was on pace to, before he tore his he hurt his ankle and was on pace to make like 7,000 yards passing. It was ridiculous. What about this year?
As far as fantasy quarterbacks go, I feel like he's one of the guys you'd want to take. Like, obviously, people have their strategies when it comes to taking quarterbacks early. Right. It's like, well, if it's not Mahomes, why am I taking him? You know?
Right.
But like that season where he was playing at an MVP level before he got hurt, like that was like he was probably a number 1 quarterback, I would think, in most leagues.
Okay.
What was the rushing total in terms of touchdowns for him last year? Because I assumed coming off the injury that he was going to basically that would be at the very bottom of his priority list, or maybe very high on his priority list would be not running at all. I think you probably, for the rest of his career, post that injury and just being the age he is, he's not going to give you the kind of value that you get from some of these quarterbacks that are going to run and what he was early in his career and could have been. That said, they're going to throw the ball.
Sure.
I assume there was the one major injury that can happen, but he is a sturdy quarterback that you expect to go out there and answer the bell week after week. He's probably going to throw for 4,000 yards and be a really, really solid pick. I don't know exactly where I slot him. Certainly below tier 1 guys, but he's right there, that next group.
Losing Amari and now, clinging on to some rookies, and I mean, James Washington just got hurt.
But
you've got an
you
incredible
do feel
tight
like
end,
CD's ready to take a pretty big step forward, if the opportunity's there.
What are CD's strengths?
Well, very similar to Dez, which is interesting because he wears a number and everything, just can twist and turn and make catches that almost nobody else can make. I mean, if you put it in a spot, CD's got athleticism that's just really, really uncommon. Does he understand all of the intricacies of the game? Like Cooper Kupp is the best example, right?
Yeah,
of a guy who just is so smart that he's going to gobble up every possible yard, you know what I mean, and find a way to get open on almost every play. To me, CD is a guy who will continue to get back. I do think his trajectory is very much like Dez's was back in the day, where athletically, and as long as he can avoid major injury, he's in that top 1%. And it's just about, is he putting in the work and coming along? And I have no reason to think he won't. To me, CD is one of the he's primed for a huge year, and Amari being out the door only helps. It's part of it.
Sure. Having all the tight number one coverage on him this year should be interesting to see.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Especially with nobody out on the other side. I mean, Gallup will eventually come back. Gallup's pretty, mediocre to maybe slightly above average, I guess you could say.
Have his moments, yeah.
But let's go over to my team, since we talked about the Cowboys the whole time here. The Philadelphia Eagles acquiring A.J. Brown. We've got another OU quarterback. We've got A.J. Brown. We've got Dallas Goedert and tight end. You've got Miles Sanders running back.
Yeah.
Deonta Smith as well. I always say
Devonta,
Devonta, yeah. I keep trying to, my son loves Jalen. He's like, I want to be Jalen Hurts for Halloween. So I just love how he says it. So we got OU quarterback Jalen Hurts. When he came in that 1 year, just me watching this, only really college I've ever watched for some reason was Jalen Hurts, because I was like, I'm an underdog, and I was like, how he left Alabama, come on,
Yeah.
But he just seemed like the perfect game manager, and that's it. Am I just wrong?
Yeah, look, I'm stunned that he is as high on quarterback draft boards as he is, because, being a guy who looks at it as the game first and fantasy has always been secondary for me. Mm-hmm. I mean, he is not a top 6 or 8 quarterback in this league, but as much as he runs and as much help as he has, I mean, you just listed it. I have now reached the point. I faded Jalen Hurts as an NFL quarterback for a long time, and I've now reached the point where I'm intrigued. Okay, where is this going? Maybe. I mean, we've seen Lamar Jackson, who will never, ever be Aaron Rodgers throwing the football.
Right, yeah.
But clearly, if you've got the right pieces around and the right game plan in place and the quarterback in the right headspace, well, you can do it differently than what we've ever seen. You can use the athleticism and strength of some of these guys in ways that it never used to be done for quarterbacks in the NFL. So he's interesting because you are guaranteed a bushel full of rushing touchdowns and rushing yards. And so I understand why he's that high. I don't think he's that great a quarterback, and he's not a guy that I would give a huge payday to.
No.
But because they've surrounded him with the talent they have in the offseason, I'm intrigued. I think I would stay away from Jalen Hurts for the most part, but I am intrigued at this point.
So Nick Sirianni, the head coach of the Eagles, comes out with a Jalen Hurts season shirt on, professing, this is Jay. Ryan, what do you think about Mr. Hurts?
He's one of those guys that, like you said, rushing wise, you look for him. Like, if he doesn't have a good game rushing, you're probably not getting a good game out of him.
But do you think AJ now there changes that, though?
It could be, because, I mean, there was I feel like Jalen Reagor was kind of a failed experiment of sorts.
Right.
And that was always, with Devonta Smith there, it's like, okay, now you have a number 1 to Devonta Smith's number 2.
Sure.
Where last year it was all Devonta Smith. And
he was a rookie.
Right.
Yeah.
I do love that kid.
Yeah. And so my thought is, if he can make defenses stay honest, respecting his rushing ability, then that should open up those guys. I mean, A.J. Brown can get open no matter what.
Right.
Right. But, I mean, he should be able to get a decent amount of wins just based off of that sort of combo, if he can run well and those guys are as good as they are projected to be.
Now, I got to ask you, does the Commanders or the Giants, does any of those teams inspire you I got to have one of them on my fantasy team?
I can't, any of those besides, Terry McLaurin on the Commanders?
Right. He's solid, but Carson, oh boy, Carson Wentz. Yeah. I mean, it's just pretty pathetic, though. I mean, he was drafted first round, got cut. I mean, I got traded off that team. Made it 1 year, and they're like, "Get the heck out of Indianapolis!" Like where there's smoke, there's fire. There's something going on over there.
Those are nice people over there in Indianapolis, right? They're not the kind to kick you to the curb unless it's warranted.
I mean, anyway,
you say Commanders, and I just giggle a little bit still.
Yeah.
Not.
Well, you said that, then I was like, "Oh boy, did I get it right?"
No, you said it right.
Okay.
It just makes me laugh every time now. I kind of preferred Washington football team.
I did too.
Yeah.
WFT. Yeah.
I was in on that. And you mentioned the Giants, and there's always the question of Saquon Barkley.
Yes.
Because he's one of these, like, if the first round
will this be the year?
Right.
Maybe you'll get lucky.
Well, if the fantasy draft, if you're given fantasy draft gets to toward the end of the first round, then you start seeing him up there on the projected, this. Oh, he could score this many points,
right?
And he's there. Would you take him if you're toward the end of that round, and maybe some of the guys you would have wanted are off the board, and you really are desperate for running backs?
I personally would, because I'll tell you what, if I could get one good week out of week one, I could trade him for all the gold in the world. I mean, everybody's like, and then week 2 or 3, he can't run more than 2 yards, and I'm like, well, that's your fault, not mine. And I reap more benefits out of it in the long term. Yeah, so that name value is worth so much, even if he comes out of the gate a little slow in the first week, but show some flashes that the hope is still alive. And fantasy is a lot about that. Is the name has so much value. And it can propel you to hold on to these people. I hate to say it, but Deandre Swift is one of them. With that name value, he came out of college being this guy is electric, but he's been injured a lot. I've had him in my fantasy league the past couple years, and it's been brutal. I actually had him and AJ, and 2 phenomenal players, but gosh, you're just like week. If you look at it just on a week by week basis, I was like, I can't ever play these guys. They're hurt. I'm trying to find, fill-in players for them, but it's just what people value at the time. So yeah, I'd definitely take him.
Yeah, he's number 17 according to this
Okay.
handy dandy ESPN fantasy football app. In
That's
terms
interesting.
of running backs, obviously.
Yeah, he's 17, huh?
So yeah, and so I assume that's a pretty good drop, right? You would have expected higher than that. And then some of the names that are below. If you can get him there, if 13, 14, 15 other backs have come off the board, I do wonder if he isn't worth a bit of a gamble this season, even though the Giants are a mess. But I like what you're saying. Week 1, if they can get him through training camp in the preseason, maybe in the right matchup, he could put up big numbers. And
yeah, because he has one good week. I maybe could get a 2023 first round pick out of the rookie draft after that, and someone that's maybe comparable and will be longer haul, maybe like a Darrell Henderson who, Sean McVay came out and said, I've got 2 RB1s here. I've got Cam Akers who coming off Achilles and Darrell Henderson who could potentially be, replaceable. Some would probably argue that he sucks. I get it. But at least you got a sturdy back that maybe will last the whole season for you. So and then you get a bonus of picking one of the incredible rookies coming out next year. Yep. So and it depends where your team is too. I mean, it's a lot to figure out. In the trading world, you got to figure out where your team is, where you're going, and that's constantly what I'm trying to figure out.
All right, so I have spent my entire summer boning up on like the Phil Steele college football preview stuff and Athlon Big 12, and now you guys have given me, what do I have? How many weeks do I have where I got to get some fantasy magazines?
You got what?
I got to dive in because you guys are bringing the takes.
I'll tell you my favorite podcast. So this is going to be
besides this one.
Besides this one right here. So if you sorry. I just played it, so I apologize. Yeah, there's my first script.
How many podcasts have you heard playing other podcasts actively on?
Never. So we're trying to this is new. Fantasy
new
Pros, their Dynasty one, I think is pretty good. The Harris podcast, which is, I think he's so cool. He's fun to listen to. And he used to be an ESPN employee, and now he's out on his own, and he does a lot of YouTube stuff. The Dynasty Nerds is really good as well. If you're just starting and really don't know much, I listen to the CBS Fantasy Football Today. I think they do a really cool job. One of our former bosses used to work with them, and actually sing their praises how good of guys they are. So those are just the top 3 that I listen to, and I listen to a lot. And one thing I thought of during this off season is you would think you would be bored because nothing's going on, but they're so good at their job and find intriguing topics. And a lot of fantasy is what we call fantasy, right? So it naturally extends in the off season as well, because you're just fantasizing on how these players might evolve,
Yep. That's been huge in the, last 25, 30 years of my life. I always go back to the baseball strike. It happened in 94, and I feel like the NFL just found a way to gobble up all the extra airspace, and people began to see that this can be something that I think about and look into year-round. And nobody does it better than the NFL, obviously, with the draft, free agency, but then fantasy's a huge, huge part of it too. So, now we enter that space. We got a sports guy and a weather guy.
Yeah,
and our man
two
Ryan
sports
Love.
guys, really,
Yeah, chopping it up all fall long. It'll be fun.
Yeah, and so when we do get in the season, we're going to focus on waiver wires, because that really becomes an integral part of your success in your season and picking up these players. So we're going to dive in. We're going to find the best players for you to take off that waiver wire and maybe lead you to a championship, because we want everybody listening to win their league. Unless you're playing me, then I want you to lose. But all the best, though.
And we only said this was going to be like 5 minutes.
Yeah, well, here we are, 35 minutes in.
That's
right?
it. Yeah. So we will expect this to start rolling out weekly as we get toward the season and into the season. We'll throw this out every Tuesday evening or so, and yeah, that'll be our plan going forward.
Let's do it. Listen to us at a 1.5 times speed, because I sound smarter at 1.5 times speed. So
I don't sound so.
Yeah, that's right. I don't sound like a dope.
Yeah.
Oh, that was fun, Mike.
It was. Thank you, guys.
Let's go. Football season.